Data has emerged as a critical asset to our national security. However, this shift towards a data-driven approach has its challenges. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to explore the challenges faced by the Department of the Air Force in implementing a data-driven approach and examine the strategies employed to address them is Andrew DiPolito, Director of Global Defense Programs for Iron Bow, who also spent 28 years in the Air Force, finishing up as USAFE Africa A6. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Wyatt. Pleasure to be here.
Let's start by just with the question of what challenges do you see the Department of Air Force facing these days in implementing a data-driven approach, and how are they being addressed?
Hey, Wyatt, that's a fantastic question, and I would posit to you that the challenge is not really technology based. Rather, it's the prioritization of capabilities to enable the DAF to implement their operational imperatives, or OIs, with the available funding, considering that there's a very fiscally constrained environment. So when you take a larger view, like a macro view, just think about the Air Force priorities as they exist today. It's modernizing an aging aircraft fleet. It's about focusing on the ultimate high ground, which is space. It's about R&D for efforts like NGAD. It's about the next generation bomber or B-21 family of systems. And I could go on, right? So there's a lot of requirements and competing requirements out there. But what makes it even more interesting and further complicates it is that there's competition within the DAF's digital priorities, right? So with finite resources to include, an aging network. Obviously, security is paramount, looking at zero trust principles, agile combat employment. And you talk about how much the Air Force has to spend just on legacy systems alone. And to kind of add to that, right, the Air Force is spending a lot of money on what's called shadow IT. And that's 70% of about 70% or more of IT spend, which is outside the CIO's purview. And Ms. Goodwine's really getting after that. So kind of that's the challenge, right? So in my opinion, this is where Ms. Goodwine really stands out. She's done a great job with her strategy document and her priorities. So she has 6 LOEs, which are focused on core IT to enable mission success. I think that's incredibly important. She starts with the foundation before we even get to data, right? So it includes building the digital backbone we need, looking at ITAS Wave 1. We're looking at base infrastructure modernization, or BIM. It's basically connectivity at the enterprise down to the tactical edge. So it's so important. Secondly, Ms. Goodwine is very focused on leveraging existing capabilities and reducing redundancy to basically save and reduce cost. So at DefenseScoop, she talked about this precisely, and she talked about leveraging DISA where it makes sense. One of those examples is the Joint Warfighter Cloud Capabilities, otherwise known as JWCC, which supports multiple public clouds and gives the Air Force access, the Department of the Air Force access to providers like Microsoft, Oracle, Amazon, and Google, right? So they have access to those at less cost. So actually, if you touch on them a little bit deeper and you go to modernization and you focus on data, you focus on LOE 1, starting with LOE 1, that's accelerate cloud adoption. And there's a lot of principles in there, but you really have to unpack them. But I'd like to focus on joint all-domain command and control, otherwise known as ABMS for the Department of the Air Force, Advanced Battle Management System. So where she really focuses, in my opinion, are perfectly. So one is on hybrid cloud. So how do you actually leverage hybrid cloud, which is using public cloud and private cloud in combination to get after your data needs? And I think that's incredibly important because it reduces cost, because you can use public cloud when you need it. It reduces transactional costs, but more importantly, it improves mission assurance and allows you to operate in a disconnected environment. Secondly, she talks about breaking down those stovepipes. So data is pretty useless unless you actually can share that data. In many cases, security classifications really kind of makes that difficult. So she's very into and very focused on reducing those stovepipes and making sure that you can leverage data at all classification levels smartly to get after those problem sets, not only with the joint partners, but with our allies and partners internationally. LOE 6 talks about data and AI, and I think that's incredibly important as well. And it talks about leveraging and enhancing data, right, using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what that does is it increases the speed and accuracy at which you can use data. Incredibly important. And while it's nascent, this allows us to make decision-making much faster and much more predictable. And so in a peer competitive environment, the DAF needs to leverage these technologies to really, truly gain competitive advantage.
Well, let's talk about the data itself. How is the Department of Air Force leveraging data to enhance operations and decision-making? And also, how is data being used to improve mission outcomes and effectiveness?
Oh, I love that question. That's a great question. First of all, I want to discuss the reason why, right? So why is data so important? And I'd like to talk about the commercial sector just for a minute, if I may, because I think there's a lot of translatability. And in fact, I think the commercial sector may be a little bit ahead of the Department of Defense at this time. So according to Anshul Ghatak in his 4 October article in 2023, it's entitled Cloud Computing and Data Management to Reshape Industries. He said that the humans will have created 175 zettabytes of data by the year 2025. So to put that in perspective, that's mind-boggling amount of data. And to just kind of give perspective, if you put it on, he said, if you put it on CD and stack it, you'll get to the moon and back. So how do you actually leverage that kind of data, right, that we're creating? He further states that that companies that actually leverage that data are 23 times more successful than their competition. So I think there's a lot of translatability to that, to the DoD. There are a lot of things that are very similar in the commercial sector, but obviously warfighting is very different, right? So when you actually translate that, we're dealing with adversaries and potential adversaries, right? Peer competition to include China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, which have very sophisticated weapon systems. They are also trying to use data and AI and ML, and they also have some advantages that we do not, like mass. So how do we deal with a smaller force and still get after all these huge problem sets? I say that that's where we have to kind of go back to the principles of JADC2 and Advanced Battle Management System, or ABMS. So ABMS is predicated on the Air Force's or Department of the Air Force's ability to better leverage data and speed. It allows you to transform vast amounts of data, right? We've discussed, and in some cases, previously thought useless data, have to decision advantage. And you have to detect meaningful patterns, right? That's what the Department of Air Force is trying to do, and draw actionable insights to improve decision-making, both in speed and accuracy. So it's predicated on decision advantage and allows you to dictate the order of battle. And I think that's the most important thing. When you look at, let's talk about a boxer. So a boxer who is actually dictating the order of the fight in a boxing match, right, is generally the person that's going to win. So an example of that is CBC2, or cloud-based command and control. So CBC2, run by General Cropsey, is for air defense for North America. That includes the United States, Canada, and obviously includes Alaska and Hawaii. And it's command and control on steroids, moving everything from kind of archaic infrastructure to the cloud, leveraging AI and ML to do precisely that.
And then let's talk a little about how you see the latest data center and cloud capabilities being utilized to really optimize that data for defense agencies.
Okay, well, so I think I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but so I'm going to talk about 3 technologies. Do this very quickly. So the first one is your on-premises data centers. We've had these for decades, right? Those are the data centers that reside at our Air Force bases. Some are consolidated, but that's basically where we get our data. And obviously the Air Force needs to modernize those. They're kind of go through their own life cycle management. But I think the things that Ms. Goodwiner are really getting after right now, the first one is hybrid cloud. So I talked about it a little bit, but what hybrid cloud does is it marries the best technologies for your on-premises or your private data center and those of the public cloud. So you can leverage the public cloud for what the public cloud does better, and you can use your private cloud for what the private cloud does better, and you can do it cost effectively. You can discern which data needs to be in the public cloud. You can discern which data needs to reside at your private data center. This reduces transactional cost. It also improves mission assurance, because if you're in a disconnected environment, if you lose connectivity, you still have that data center on-prem, right? And you also want to push it to the tactical edge, but that's essentially what hybrid cloud is, and I think that's a real winner. Secondly, the next technology is multi-cloud. So multi-cloud can be kind of discerned as basically it's using 2 or more public cloud. service providers like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or Oracle, right? So they each have their own capabilities. They each have their own advantages, right? So Google may be better at artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the Department of the Air Force may say, okay, we're going to use Google for that. Or you may want to go to Amazon Web Services or Microsoft because they have ease of use. And that allows you to execute that. Plus, it avoids vendor lock-in. So you're not locked into one public cloud provider.
And then can you share some specific examples of how solutions, like Ironbow's offers are helping defense agencies achieve some of these data-driven goals you're talking about?
Okay, that's a question that kind of goes near and dear, right? So talking about Ironbow, particularly, we're very focused on mission-driven, being a mission-driven partner. And what's that mean? That means the most important thing is understanding the customer or understanding the warfighter, right? In terms of their priorities. So our focus is to bring together and be agnostic, right? All solutions may not fit at this time, but to bring together the solutions using a vast array of OEMs and SIs or system integrators, right? To bring in the best solution that will support that customer. So I think that's where Ironbow does shine. But kind of looking at, the LOEs, focusing on the LOEs, the real priority is going after hybrid cloud at this time and CSFC. So let's talk about hybrid cloud just for a second. As stated earlier, the best thing that industry needs to bring to the table, and Ironbow does really well, is matching those private cloud and those public cloud technologies. One example is application rationalization. So the Air Force is trying to get after rationalizing applications and publishing them in the cloud. The problem is that a lot of them are legacy and they just don't operate in the public cloud. So there are technologies available to take that and put it in a wrapper and then still be able to operate it natively in that public cloud, which aids in the speed of actually getting it published in that public cloud. When you're talking about CSFC, one of the areas that I think is incredibly important is being able to break down those stovepipes, and that's bring together different OEMs and SIs so that you can actually have a solution that includes cross-domain solutions and actually get that data from high to low, low to high, so that it's usable, and it needs to be obviously within security guidance, and it needs to be done smartly, but you can use it instantaneously. So I think that's obviously incredibly important.
And then lastly, Andrew, how can industry partners more effectively support the Department of Air Force and the DoD in general in moving towards this holistic data strategy that they're seeking to achieve?
So I think that it's all about teamwork, right? So the Department of Air Force it's not about necessarily leading the Department of the Air Force. It's about being a mission partner with the Department of the Air Force and a mission partner with each other. Right? There's plenty of opportunity amongst all industry partners to get business. The most important is successfully enabling the Department of the Air Force for mission success, right? So it's understanding the priorities, understanding how they all nest within one of each other. So obviously modernization, security, cloud, they're all interchangeable. They're all tied together. So it's not anything in a vacuum. There's definitely got to be alignment as industry moves forward. So I think, again, part of the solution is hybrid cloud, and industry, if they're getting after it, will be able to better support the Department of the Air Force to achieve those effects for ABMS and JADC2 that are so critical to decision-making at speed and with accuracy. Now, as you said, I've served 20 years in the Air Force, 4 years and then for another 4 years at the Academy, 32 years. And I'll tell you, almost being 52 years old, I think that you look at what's happening in the world today, right? It's more dangerous than it ever has been. And it requires unique partnerships. It really requires a village. And that village includes the Department of the Air Force, the greater DoD, and it includes industry, and it includes academia. All need to work together to get those mission effects to enable the Department of the Air Force. And it takes all of us to navigate this and provide our warfighters the technologies and achieve competitive advantage.
Well, Andrew DiPolito, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share some of your insights with us and also really talk about how data-driven approaches are really critical to the success of the Department of the Air Force and the Defense Department at large. So thank you for sharing all your information with us.
Thank you so much, Wyatt. It's been an absolute pleasure.